So those of you who are joining us, this is Richard, who I'll pass over to shortly and stop speaking. He's got nearly 40 years of experience in broadcasting and has been a director for some of the BBC's most prestigious programmes over the past decade. First captivated by hospital radio in Epping, Essex, and then a radio in London. He joined BBC Radio as a sound engineer, mainly working on Radio 1 and Radio 2. That's so cool. I actually should have said in my emails to you, Richard, I used to do student radio, and then I was involved in the Radio Academy, and I was hoping to go into radio, but I ended up working in print instead. But I love radio. So yeah, so then he joined BBC TV News as a studio operator. I'm not going to say the whole thing because it was on Eventbrite. So then he's been a vision mixer, then director. He's worked on BBC World News, BBC National News, a Sunday politics programme, and then loads of stuff abroad as well. So without further ado, we've got another person that come in. Right, and Io said hello. He's the social media editor for PressPad. So he's going to be getting the questions to everyone at the end. Anyway, so Richard, I will pass over to you and start speaking.
Thank you very much indeed, and welcome along everyone. This is a unique experience for me because usually I go into schools with the charity Speakers for Schools, and so I get to talk to people and I can see their faces, I can see their reactions. This is quite an interesting broadcasting experience, trying to push information out. I get to feel as one of our presenters would feel in the news studio. So as I talk to you over the next half an hour or so, I'm going to be talking a lot about the history of broadcasting, the history of the BBC and myself, also looking at things for the future. And I'll be using the term convergence an awful lot. Convergence in the world of electronics is something that the Kodak company failed to look at when digital cameras came along. Kodak thought that everyone would remain with ordinary photographic units. And of course, they went out of business. So in the world of news operations, in vision mixing, in terms of directing, one of the things that we say at the moment is we are the magicians, and that's why I'm here in Dumbledore's office. But if I'm not careful, you never know, a director could end up a bit like one of these guys, as something of a dinosaur, because you're coming along. And one of the fantastic things about journalist training right now is that in days gone by, you used to be focused very much on the purity of the word. Now it's about creating your own material, both in terms of video editing, audio editing, creating graphics, doing everything on the laptop. And as we go around the discussion for the next half an hour, you will see some things that are common to your knowledge base, and also hopefully I'll give you an insight into some of the things that I've gone through myself. So first of all, one of the things I'm going to do is hit you straight away with what does a director do. Now in terms of that, I've got a little video which I shall show you now. So let me do that. And hopefully we go like this. Screen and... Okay, so we've got 10 seconds to end. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, opt-in, and cue Aaron.
Hey, that's the bell ringing on Wall Street right now.
Coming through to camera 3.
The US markets are
and on 3.
And of course, we are live across the globe.
Going to hard set next.
Everybody. Well, we made it, but we still have time. Sometimes money music matters. I'm Aaron Heselhurst, and this is Talking
Off to the hard
Take a
set.
look at the top story, feeling the force.
Over your
Disney
right shoulder.
breaks it in with big box office hits, but this, the new streaming service, sucking up a lot of cash.
Out of vision.
So will the Disney
So,
Plus scandal
setting
pay
with
off?
guest.
The House of
Excellent.
Cards goes head to head with Netflix and Amazon for streaming supremacy.
And in vision.
Hey, we're going to be hearing from this media expert.
We'll be
right
moving
today.
to the
TV
catwalk
streaming is an
next.
expensive arm race, but Disney has some of the deepest pockets out there. Hey, also
And
on the
next we
program,
go.
with 250,000 smartphone users, you'd think Africa would be a no-brainer for Twitter, right? So why has the big boss only made it to the continent for the very first time? This
Markets going in screen.
As always, we'll bring you all the action.
Markets
looking
out of
in
screen.
reverse at the moment on the global market. And food for thought.
Out of vision.
We're gonna take
Coming back into vision for
what
Aaron to
could
walk
be
out of shot
big
with a
changes
defocus.
With high-tech monitors telling us what to chow down on.
And in vision.
All of that coming up on this edition of Talking
Pushing in, running titles. Excellent. Cue position next, please.
So that just gives you a little insight into the world of a director. Yes, we are stuffed full of technology. We talk in terms of lots of abbreviations. We sit in a room which is generally quiet, and it's something where journalists, when they enter, first of all, find it quite scary. And actually, I want to tell you that we're not scary at all. We actually rather like journalists. We like the work that journalists do. And so what I'm going to be doing over the next 20 minutes or so is encouraging you to find the best ways of working. Now, one of the things that I'll talk about, first of all, is my experience in radio, because I, like you, at 16 years of age, was wondering what to do. I happened to be rather good at electronics and physics and left school and went off to British Aerospace for a combined university apprenticeship, which I'll have to admit, I absolutely hated. I hated what I was doing. I hated everything about it, except that I learned how to use a soldering iron. And a friend of mine asked me to go to see a hospital radio station. Now, at the time, I'd never seen what a hospital radio station was like. And there I was, sent into this lovely little place with lots of people trying to fix lots of things. And I suddenly discovered that I felt at home. Now, at the time, I was an introvert. I was someone that was very good at playing around with electronics, but not particularly good at speaking up for myself, and certainly not being in front of the microphone. But I was teamed up with someone who came there with no technical experience, but wanted to become a journalist. And what we did was we bounced off each other and did lots of recordings and made lots of packages, as we call them in the broadcast world. And so I suddenly started to learn all about what being a journalist was. Now, when I talk about editing, this is the type of editing that we would do. None of your laptop-based electronic editing. It was all about using a razor blade cutting into 1/4 inch tape, and then you take out the jointing tape, put that together, and then spool the tape back on against the heads and check that the recording had worked and that the edit had worked. And those of you who have used audio recording units as well now know that you can replace edits, whereas back then replacing edits was quite tough. As you can see here, we've got Radio 1, we've got recording areas. I also went off and did some work for radio drama and radio news, but actually I wanted to work in television. Now, television had grown up from the film industry. So of course, a lot of the equipment was big and bulky and needed taking back to base. Specialists would process film, get film ready for playing out. none of the modern things were really accessible to people. But after I joined the BBC and done some time in radio, I jumped over to television and got an opportunity to become someone called a vision mixer. Now, a vision mixer is the person that pushes the buttons, that changes the pictures that you see at home on your TV. You also sit next to the director, and the director is someone who controls what's going on. In other jobs around the place, here we can see some video editors at work. Again, I relate it to the modern thing where you can cut things on your laptop. In 1986, there was the revelation of electronic graphics systems, which allowed the BBC in the mid-90s to experiment with virtual reality systems. And this was the time that I first started to get the opportunity to direct in the blue screen era. So we would have a virtual reality system complete with remote control cameras. Now these cameras, rather like the joysticks that you use for video games, we had video control units with joysticks that would allow you to drive the cameras all over the place and around and about. And this is the kind of area where I started off. Now, one of the things about job progression is after a while in the studios, you get an opportunity to go out and about. And I suppose early 2000, they let me go off around the globe to work on all kinds of programs. Now, one of the things that I would always recommend to a young journalist is have at home a grab bag. A grab bag consists of some clothing, some bits and pieces that you would need, because even in a fairly junior position, you can get called upon to go out and work on a developing breaking news situation. I had a friend and colleague who was asked to go off to Brussels on the Eurostar, supposedly for an afternoon, and actually they ended up spending 5 days in Brussels. Now the BBC is not unique. CNN, Al Jazeera and Sky do the same things. So as someone that works inside broadcasting, there are many opportunities that come along and to make your day even better. Technology and convergence is changing, and all of you that have been through either the education system at the moment, or indeed if you're working in newsrooms, you're getting used to the broadcast technology that has been put into our control rooms and our newsrooms over the past 15 years or so. Now, one of the things that I operate in my day-to-day work is a automation system which replaces an awful lot of the jobs that we would normally have in around the news studios. Now, the automation system, if I come back to sharing the screen again, is, let me just change this on. The automation system inside the gallery is a big list device. It lists events, it takes charge of the vision mixing panel, the sound panel, the lighting desk, even the cameras. And I, as a director, and my colleagues as directors, get to push buttons that change the pictures and the sound that the viewers see. But all of this is directly correlated to the hard work that the journalistic team put in using the newsroom computer system. Now, 6 months ago, the BBC changed over to a system called Open Media. And Open Media is something that has been picked up by other broadcasters as well. And it's a very good system for some things and very confusing system for others. But one of the major things that we have to do as both journalists and directing staff is get these instructions. The little blue shapes that you can see on the screen are the technical instructions. Also on that screen are the elements of the words that the presenter is going to have to read out. And let's say that the training that both the BBC and other broadcasters have given both the technical staff and the journalists hasn't been great to start with, because all computer systems demand that you put correct information in. When the automation system was first designed by a company in Norway, they had about 250 templates, as we call them, that the journalists could call upon to put information into a script page to say, play a video clip next, play a graphics screen next, put this picture into this screen. So that was 250. At the BBC at one point 3 years ago, we had nearly 80,000 templates. And for any journalist, even the ones that are the best equipped to deal with technology, a selection from 80,000 templates is ridiculous. It's almost impossible. So we have whittled that down, but we still need the journalists to put in the right information for us in the gallery to get the right things going out to the viewer. And I and my colleagues are really encouraging to any of you that come into the world of broadcasting, come and talk to us. It is empowering for you to actually admit out loud, sorry, I don't really understand what I've got to do here. It is far better for you to come and talk to us and ask our advice on how to fix this sequence that you really want to put together and make it look spectacular and wonderful. If you put it together with things that you're not quite sure of, and we haven't had time to check it, it can fall apart on air, and that is spectacular and awful, and everyone goes away feeling terrible. It's far better with the 15 minutes before the programme begins to poke your head into our little room and to ask our advice, and we won't bite your head off, we won't do anything other than be helpful to you. So there's no way that I can obviously give you a complete and utter understanding of every element that we do in broadcasting. So this is just really going to be very much a thumbnail sketch for those of you to see what we get up to. In terms of my job, I've taken this pathway through the technical side. In terms of the journalism side, we have the most junior people all the way up to presenters. The ITN many years ago used to have newscasters where the BBC had presenters, and the definition of between the two was one was trained journalist, one wasn't. One was a presenter with no journalism background. Now that has all changed, and both Sky, ITN, Al Jazeera, all of their presenters are seasoned journalists. They know what you're going through. They understand just how difficult it is for the junior people to get used to the pressures of what's going on. So the next little video clip I would like to play you is to give you a bit of an insight of what it's like to be a presenter. It's a sort of day in the life of a presenter, and just see what you think about this.
Hello everyone, my name is Mariam Mashiri and I'm a presenter here at BBC News. I've been here for about 16 years, presenting both business and main news on BBC World News, the BBC's international channel, and BBC News Channel, which you can watch here in the UK. My typical working day can start at any time because I do a lot of different shifts that could start early in the morning or in the evening. I come into work and the first thing I do is go down to the basement of New Broadcasting House, where I get made up by the wonderful ladies in the makeup department. So makeup can take, for someone like me, up to about 45 minutes. For men, it's a lot easier because they can just come in, get a bit of powder, a bit of foundation, and they're ready to go. After makeup, I head up to my team, where we have a team meeting and talk about the programme, what stories we'll be doing, what guests I'll be interviewing, and how we want the programme to look and to feel. Then it's simply a question of me sitting down on a computer and reading all the stories of the day, coming up with ideas, talking through what we're going to be doing, but also thinking about what questions I'm going to be asking my guests. So these are all things that I prepare for before I go on set with Sally. Today, the US Federal Reserve. Later this week, the Bank of Japan and the Bank of England, all deciding on the cost of borrowing as they focus on keeping their economic engines from stalling. Also in the programme, talking trade. President Trump says he's had a very good chat with Chinese leader Xi Jinping on the phone. A good precursor, perhaps, to next week's G20 summit in Japan. Also, the markets are open and, as you can see, they're looking flat. Of course, broadcasting is a very serious business, but also it has to be said, as a team, we try and have fun as much as possible. And remember, things can and do often go very wrong, with cameras moving in the wrong direction, guests not turning up, and pictures not arriving into the building on time. And these are all things that you have to be prepared to deal with. So one of the best bits of advice that I have for any budding broadcasters out there is expect the unexpected and always be prepared. Today.
Thank you, and thank you very much for all your tweets. If you do want to read them, it's #BizLives, BBC Biz Live.
Thanks so much for watching. Have a wonderful weekend and happy Friday. Bye-bye.
It's Thursday. Bye-bye.
Oh, it is.
We shall see more of Mariam towards the end of this talk. And what Mariam had to say there is absolutely true. They, in the presenter's seat, have to prepare an awful lot of things. They have to get their head around half an hour, an hour's worth of broadcasting. And if you break down the various jobs that journalists are doing, at one end of the scale, you are cutting pictures and writing a bit of script for what the BBC calls OOV. I believe Sky calls it overlay. The BBC's OOV means out of vision, where the presenter is speaking over the top of something as the video is playing. Right the way through to interviews. Now, as a young journalist, you might be given the task of setting up an interview for the programme. And one of the tasks that you will be given in setting that interview up is preparing a brief for the presenter. Because if you think about it, in a half-hour programme, say there are 5 interviews to get through, and we're now 45 minutes from when the programme begins. That's an awful lot of information that the presenter is going to have to take in to ensure that they carry out a really good interview. So a brief is a sheet or 2 sheets of A4 paper with salient facts about your guest on there. And you, as the journalist that's preparing those things, have to think about what is the best way to present information to the presenter. Why are we talking to that guest? where is the guest coming from on a particular issue? And it's not really fair to the presenter just to lift something off Wikipedia or something from a quote that they put out in a tweet. You've got to go and research a little bit more information to give the presenter a chance at asking a decent question, particularly if the guest is going to be a controversial figure. Sometimes with controversial figures, we can't give them a free ride in the middle of a program to say whatever they want to say. We as broadcasters have got to push back and make it seem fair. So if a mythical guest has a problem with, say, the Home Office, have you phoned the Home Office to get a reaction to what has been said? If you've done that, write that down in the brief, so at least the presenter has an opportunity to fairly treat the controversial guest. Also, that right of reply, if the guest is coming up with something that makes an organisation seem as though it's in a bad light, if we're going to be fair and equitable as a broadcaster, we should be able to ensure that we can give the form of right of reply. And of course, if we've got 5 of those interviews to prepare the presenter for, your information has got to be good, it's got to be concise, and it's got to be really short and snappy. So certainly when I was telling presenters that I work with that was going to carry out this evening's discussion, they really wanted to get across to you that it's a really important facet of the work that you do. Now, back to this convergence idea. Me, as this elderly person that works in broadcasting, has tried to keep across all of the developments that are going on in technology. But as Douglas Adams, the writer of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, noted, anyone that's over 30 views modern developments as something quite at odds with their day-to-day living. And certainly these things here, these phones, have really made a huge difference to the way in which we all operate in the broadcasting world. We've got several ways in which broadcasters are trying to chase your age group, because from a station manager's point of view, the 16 to 30 age group is the least connected with broadcasting that managers have ever known. You are out there with Netflix, you are out there with online consumption of material. And broadcasters like the idea of traditional linear broadcasting, where they're in their comfort zone. They've got on their night gear and their comfy slippers. And so your age group really sort of suggests...
Hello, I'm Ben Bland, a BBC News presenter, working with Quibi, where I host a daily
your
global news
age
show.
group really does suggest a difficulty for people to know what's going on. So one of the things that the BBC are experimenting with right now is a thing called Quibi. It's a new system that's been brought about by an American organization. And if I share the screen, I've got a dear friend, Ben Bland, who will tell you all about it.
Hello, I'm Ben Bland, a BBC News presenter, working with Quibi, where I host a daily global news show. Welcome to Around the World, the show that brings you the most important global stories. Today, we break down the UK's coronavirus crisis as the Prime Minister's hospitalised. We go inside the Italian village turned laboratory and the simple chore bringing joy to Australians. Now, Quibi is a brand new streaming service in the US, and everything is short-form video designed to be watched on your mobile. So everything's under 10 minutes. Our show is about 5 minutes each day. It sort of recognises that people want to know what's happening in the world, but you've got a lot of other demands on your time. And the other nifty thing about it, the very clever thing, is that everything works both vertical and horizontal. So however you hold your phone, it's going to look good.
And I think technology is really democratizing in the world of broadcasting. And no longer are the youngest members of the team the ones who have to remain silent. In fact, what I would say to you is, be bold, come up with ideas. When you do find yourself working in a production team, in radio or television, the program editors are always going to be asking at the start of the day for program ideas, for ideas of features. And you need to be bold. You need to speak up for what you think is going on. And don't be frightened of trying to be inventive. One of the great things that I've noticed in my broadcasting career is that we go around a great big circle roughly every 15 years. And right now we are doing virtual newsrooms, which the BBC tried in the 90s, and then we went to physical desks and physical space. So basically everything does a big circle, and just because it didn't work 15 years ago doesn't mean that it won't work now with the way that modern technology is moving. So always be prepared to find your voice. Now, obviously, don't be bombastic at this point. Don't push yourself too far in front of things. Learn to have that delicate art of diplomacy, of introducing the idea of why you want to do something, to give yourself an opportunity to do things. There was a young producer in the BBC World News area about a year ago that had an idea for a documentary feature she wanted to do. She pushed it and pushed it to the World Newsroom. Someone, I think, suggested that she visit Newsbeat with the idea. Newsbeat actually commissioned the documentary, which ended up as an hour-long documentary, which was played out on BBC Three and then BBC One. All this from a germ of an idea from someone that was quite junior in the newsroom. And I think it was incredible to see this documentary played out on BBC One. So have the courage of your conviction, learn how to speak up for the ideas that you want to do. Now, all broadcasters will give you training, particularly if they're going to send you off to places. And as you've seen in the past week with the various crowd gatherings, riots can take place in the most simple of circumstances, and going out to do an audio or video recording of something can be fraught with danger. Now, a number of years ago, all broadcasters put their collective heads together and got someone to approach the police training system to see if we could come along and find out where, as broadcasters, we ought to stand should there be crowd control going on. So if I share the screen now, let's give you a little insight as to what happens when you're taught how to look after yourself in riots.
This is the last part of my training. As you can see, on one side we've got the protesters. On the other side we've got all our officers poised and ready to go, both of them looking quite intimidating. Adam, please can you talk me through how this is all going to work?
Well, basically the officers are going to move down looking to take control of a street, and get back ground. So you've got them moving in shield formation, coming down, working as the disorder takes off.
I better get in there, Adam.
Let's have a go.
Thank you very much.
Eyes are down, Michelle. Eyes are down, mate.
Eyes are down, OK.
Just face the front. OK, here we are. Just waiting for it now, Michelle.
Forward! Forward!
Okay, here we go. Forward. Here we go, Michelle. That's you. You're good. You're good.
OK.
Keep going.
Oh, my gosh.
Just keep going. Keep your fingers together. That's you. Here we go. Okay, stay through, Michelle. Stay through. We're good. We're good. We're good. We're good. In you come. Come on. Up beside me. You're all right. Dress back.
Oh, sorry.
Good. Stand still. Stand still. Come out the flame.
So that's part of a 2-day course that broadcasters get sent on. The part of the rioters is played by off-duty police. Obviously, the police cadets are taking part and learning their elements. And you as a broadcaster will get shown both the correct clothing to wear just in case things go wrong, and petrol bombs or things are being thrown, and also where the British police are likely to crowd control and cordon you off. So you get to learn how to stand. And it's very interesting because, as we saw before coronavirus came along, there were weeks and weeks and weeks of protests out in Hong Kong where this kind of thing happened to our reporter on the ground.
If we come down here a bit further, so the police have just retreated, and this is the tear gas going off. Again, if my eyes look a bit red, it's because we've got tear gassed ourselves. I don't want to get too close because we won't know how to keep broadcasting. But that is the situation. It's very tense. Now, even if we look across the street, you can see how many protesters are gathering here. Because all around this town, there are so many protesters, tens of thousands, who've turned out for this illegal march to the scene of last week's attacks by triad gangs on pro-democracy protesters.
Now, obviously, that was a very serious situation, and it's very scary to be involved in that kind of thing. But as a journalist, as someone that works in broadcasting, it can actually be quite exhilarating to be involved in these things. And if you want to give yourself a laugh, check out YouTube for someone called Quentin Somerville. Quentin was someone that I worked with when he was a trainee business producer back in around about 2008, 2009. He's now one of the BBC's foremost war reporters. He has been in so many hotspots and difficult situations. He and the camera staff and the producers there do amazing work. But on YouTube, there is a fantastic clip of what happened to Quentin when in, I think it was Kandahar, they seized a lot of drugs and decided to burn the drugs. So if you want to give yourself a laugh, check out Quentin Somerville for that kind of thing. Now, one of the biggest changes in all areas of broadcasting is the approach to bullying. What I will say is not everything has been written out of town, but we have certainly got a lot better than we used to be. So the next little video or clip I will play you is a famous bit of broadcasting, not from the news division. It's from the Eurovision Song Contest in the late 70s. But what I would ask you to do is think about how you personally would react if you were working on the program and you were being shouted at like this.
Cue orchestra! Cue orchestra, go to 4. Take the lights down, 4. 505. Take the lights! House lights!
Marina! Shut up, network. 507A, 1 next.
Can you switch the thing off? Please, pull a plug out or something. Out of frame on the roller. Out of frame on the roller. Is that it? You got the roller there? What's next?
3 next.
3, wide shot 3. Wide, wide!
509, 2 next.
And cue the revolve! Cue the revolve!
Stand by on the roller.
Stop the roller! Get the roller back! Get the roller back! Bloody idiot!
So, it's not often like that in the modern world of broadcasting. That's not to say it's perfect, but we are certainly an awful lot better than we used to be. And I'm getting towards the end of this brief little snapshot of the world of broadcasting. What I will say to you is, it's a really exciting thing. Yes, it's hard to get into, but frankly, these days, all jobs are really hard to get into. Have the courage of your conviction, and whatever you do, don't take no for an answer. If you're studying at the moment and trying to make applications to broadcasters, there are going to be lots of people accepting those invitations and those applications. Don't be put off if you get rejected for the first, second or third time. It took me 8 attempts to eventually persuade them to allow me to become a director. So whatever you do, don't get put off. And if you are working in a newsroom or a broadcasting area, just keep your head down, keep working, keep coming up with ideas, and learn the art of chatting to those people who are in charge, offering your services. Let them know that you're keen to get on. There is nothing better than knowing that someone would like to become something other than they are. I'm famous in amongst the younger producers for arranging them to do screen tests. Obviously, as a junior producer who would love to become a presenter, the first thing you've got to do is put together some video material showing what you look like on screen. And I'm a sucker for helping people out. So, talk to the people around you, let them know that you're keen and interested and have ideas. Always push the idea that you want to get on, and do it kindly, do it with humility, and the world will open up for you. The last little clip I'd like to play you is going back to lovely Mariam Mashiri, because in all the seriousness of the world of broadcasting, this sometimes is what we have to put up with Mariam.
Go for it, go for it. This is the briefing from Mariam Mashiri. La la la, tra la la. I'm going to show you how high I can go. La la la. Hold on, one more. Fa la la. One more. Tra la la.
So yes, that from a serious broadcaster, we love her to bits. So thank you for listening to this brief introduction to the world of broadcasting. It is fun, thrilling, exciting. It also is challenging, but rewarding. So join us in the world of broadcasting if you can. Come up with ideas and push the idea that you want to get on. So with that, I'm going to hand back to Nicola to collate some questions.
Brilliant. Wow, that was amazing. I said within about 5 minutes of you speaking that I suddenly wanted to get a job in TV now. So I've only ever been a print journalist and digital. So yeah, now I'm like, oh my God, that looks so exciting. I'm sure that we've had lots of people saying thank you. So yeah, I was going to collect your questions on the chat, and Amber's looking on Facebook, but I've got a few that I want to ask. They're sort of more about your career, but yeah, what's been your career high, Richard?
I suppose from a career high point of view, being asked on a Friday afternoon if I was doing anything next Tuesday, and if so, would I like to fly out to Washington to spend a day at the White House, was pretty spectacular. I had 4 years as series director of the Sunday morning political program Breakfast with Frost, which these days is Andrew Marr's program. And working with Sir David had the most incredible contact book, and he knew presidents and prime ministers and stars of the day. And we had secured an interview at the White House. And what was fascinating for me, I'm an American politics junkie. I love the bits of it. And there was a famous drama series called The West Wing that was out and about at the time, was showing on screen. And when we arrived at the White House, the camera crew and the lighting guys had all the equipment to set up. So I was sat there as the director, twiddling my thumbs for a couple of hours. And so the press secretary took me for a personally conducted tour of the White House. Now, the only place I didn't get into was the Oval Office, but, you know, it was incredible. But also, when I look back to my times in Radio 1, Radio 2, I was there, I was a completely junior person. If I said Live Aid, the big concert that was on, I was the most junior person working on that. I can't claim any fame whatsoever, but I was there.
That's still cool.
You know, the BBC has been an incredible place for personal things, but also an incredible place to meet superb, wonderful people.
That's so cool. Right, we've got a few questions now. So Io's going to pop his video on. Here he is, and he's going to ask the questions. So I'll hand over to Io.
Hi guys. Hi Richard.
Hello.
I think the first question we have here is, how easy is it to switch from on-screen journalism to producing and the tech side of broadcasting, and vice versa?
They're very similar, sort of. The terminology, certainly at the BBC, is a confusing one because journalists are producers. And basically you have the broadcast journalist, which is the first point on the rung, then the senior broadcast journalist, and then you've got editors. And the only difference in those roles is the senior broadcast journalist is the person that will create the running order, the list of events that we're going to work through. The broadcast journalist is the person that is creating pretty much every single script. And it's a funny thing, because if I were a presenter right now talking to everyone about the day's work, I would say that I, as the presenter, wrote all of the information. It's not strictly true, because basically the broadcast journalist does the bulk of the initial work. But if any of you have tried writing a speech for a friend, what you've got to do is get your head into the vocal style of the person you are writing for. So if you wrote a bit of factual script, but you knew the person that's going to be reading it out likes to add a bit of florally language, you have to think in your own head, how would they say it? Now, journalism and producer sort of meld together, because the journalist producers that I know at the BBC have to think about the words, the pictures, and how we're going to, as a viewer, see that. They come up with the ideas in their head, and sometimes that's successful straight away. Other times they need to involve one of us in the directing side to shape the look of the camera angles or the different things. So journalist and producer, certainly at the BBC, are interchangeable.
Thank you. The next question is from Misha, who asks, what is some advice you could offer for sending applications to introduction level positions if your experience is limited?
It's one of the questions that used to be so much easier to answer in the good old days. Back then, the BBC had lots of ways in, and basically writing, you would watch the end of a program, you would note down the name of the editor of the program and write a letter to them saying, I'm someone that's keen and interested. Unfortunately, in the modern world, what the BBC and other broadcasters have done is centralize their application process. So if you go to the BBC Careers website, bbc.co.uk/careers, there is a whole section on work experience, first careers, and then second, third generation applications. And I'm afraid it just comes down to persistence. If you're someone that's currently in study, you've got to think about what is your unique selling point. What is going to make you stand out in terms of the application? So are you involved in university radio? Do you have a blog? Have you made YouTube videos? Do you do TikTok? All of those things are really good things to bolster an application. The BBC have got had a Facebook Live group where some of the people working there didn't actually have a bona fide entry into via university courses and lots of other bits and pieces. But what they had was primary experience of making YouTube videos. Suddenly, all of the old-fashioned ideas that you must do this, followed by this, followed by this, the rule book is being torn up because YouTube and TikTok have completely changed the marketplace. It's something where your experience at making content is probably superior to the people that are interviewing you. So I would say anyone that's really keen and interested, that has got a background work, a body of work that they've put together, as long as you've got a good application and you're persistent, and I will keep on coming back to the thing, one of the things that defines you working in any area of broadcasting is that you're persistent, that you don't take the knockback personally. If you fail on this time, then you're just going to try a bit harder next time. When you get to my age, the one thing you don't want to have is regrets that you didn't try something. So I would say, make your TikToks. It's the kind of thing that I don't understand. I do not understand influencers whatsoever, but I do know that they're really important in the modern working world.
Thank you for that answer. That was really great. The next question is from Charlotte, who asks, who did an assignment on the BBC and BBC News in 2016, and there was like some talk about allowing biased broadcast news. Do you think this will occur in the near future as online news and citizen journalism are often called upon?
The BBC has become synonymous with people using the term fake news and biased news. And it's something that we've, in the broadcast family, we've all had to get used to hearing that said about our product and, of course, other broadcasters' product as well. You do have to set aside your emotional response to that and try to dig into why are the people saying that you're biased? Is it because the information that you are broadcasting happens to be different to their way of thinking? If it's that, then it's not biased. It's their own mind that isn't open enough to hearing other views. We do have a problem in broadcasting where for the past few years we've thought about false equivalence, that if you get in a climate change expert, and I think that 98% of the world now understands that climate change is a thing. But for some reason, broadcasters thought that you had to bring on the opposition voices to balance up the discussion, when in fact, bringing those people onto your program and giving them the same level of exposure actually makes it harder for you to say that you are a broadcaster that is giving factual information. So bias is in the eye of the beholder. We have senior people at the BBC that have created a document which we all have to live by, the rules and regulations of what is allowed, what isn't allowed. For instance, if I had a book here that I'd written, I wouldn't be allowed to put that book as something that was behind me, that I was advertising subliminally. These are all little things that broadcasters are expected to do to make sure that fake news doesn't appear on screen. In fact, our colleagues who used to be BBC School Report but are now BBC Young Reporter have got an amazing array of helpful video material to allow you to think about what is fake and what isn't. And as a consumer of information, you've always got to ask yourself, where is this coming from? Is it likely to be true? And it's for people that are really interested in joining the broadcasting world, I think thinking very carefully about how you would combat being accused of putting out a fake report is a really important thing.
Thank you. I think that answered Charlotte's question very well. The next question is, if you don't have much experience with tech, but want to be a presenter, do you think it's worth rising yourself up on tech skills? And how can you work on this during lockdown?
I think that tech skills naturally are coming to all of you, because when I look at family groups sitting around a table, well, this was pre-COVID, of course, pre-social distancing, everyone is using their phone. Technology, to give you an example, when I was training in BBC Radio, when I was thin and dark-haired, which was many, many years ago, we did an experiment where we went out onto Oxford Street with a portable audio recorder and a microphone, and people would shy away from us. They would actively run away because no one wanted to be interviewed. Now, if you were to go out on Oxford Street with a camera, you would be mobbed, because technology has entered all of our lives. So deep understanding of an editing program isn't necessarily important, although to have an idea how you would tidy up the beginning and the end of something that you'd made would be rather good. but actually, what is the content? What is the heart and spirit of what you're making? And therefore, there are social media stars that have had no training whatsoever. There are actors that are getting jobs now that have never been to acting school, but they are social media stars. So I actually think that formal training is useful, but actually, if you've got heart and soul and you are really demonstrating what you're doing by the brimming of wonderful spirit, actually you can persuade people to do anything.
Thank you. I think the first part of Nicola's question as we answered, so I'll answer the second part. What can young people do to prepare for a career in TV while they're still stuck at home?
What I would say is, don't just look at things that are inside your comfort zone. Look at things that you wouldn't normally look at. An awful lot of young people think news is very boring, but actually what we report on does influence your world. Business journalism, numbers and figures. It's very difficult to understand what's going on, and yet it really does affect what's going on. So whilst we're in lockdown, have a look at programs that you wouldn't normally look at. For instance, if you love current on-trend music, have a look at YouTube videos of what the BBC did at the proms. Take a ride along a path that challenges your viewpoint, because what you want to do when you get into an interview situation is make the interviewer feel as though you have a wide understanding of what's going on. And if I use an example of myself, when I first set out, was an introvert. I could not have sat in front of all of you and created the last 45 minutes on your timeline, because I'd have been tongue-tied, I'd have gone red with embarrassment, and I'd have been completely ill-equipped to speak out loud. And over the years, what I've done is I've watched people that I really admire come alive when talking to people. It's the kind of thing, if you think about when you're in a social group, are you someone that if you're, and again, this is pre-COVID, when you're standing in a group of people, are you one of the quieter ones that tends to listen to the conversation, or are you someone that joins in the conversation? Now, the trick that I had when I was just setting out on becoming a director, and again, I was embarrassed, I was tongue-tied, and by the end of the first program that I got through, I'd been very careful to enunciate my words carefully and purposefully. And the presenter said to me, "You sounded just like a vicar giving a Sunday morning sermon." Now that was great, because I became like an actor, because the next time I sat down in the director seat, the presenter said to me, "Oh, hello, Vicar, how are you?" Suddenly, I wasn't the embarrassed Richard that didn't know how to speak up for myself. I became the vicar who was able to pretend. And interestingly, the more you pretend, the easier it becomes to become that person. So if you are someone that gets a bit shy about speaking up, just imagine a favorite person, a favorite pop star, a favorite presenter. How would they be? Imagine yourself into their role and be that. I know it's a little bit fake it till you make it, but it does work.
Thank you. I think that's all the questions we have had. now. So I'm going to pass it back to Nicola.
Great, thank you. That was so useful. And I know that, yeah, I mean, I was just lapping it up, and I've never worked in broadcast journalism. And that was also really good advice about the things that you can do as you prepare for applications, and also the stuff that you can do from home. I'm always telling like young journalists that I speak to about reading widely, and yeah, trying to learn different skills so that you've got more to talk about in your interviews, basically. So yeah, that was great. So we've got a feedback form that we would love you to fill in and say how much you enjoyed this this talk, which I'm sure you will all say positive feedback for. We're applying for lots of funding at the moment, and so we need your feedback to help us make a case for loads of people to give us money, basically. So please, yeah, fill out the feedback form. It would really, really help us out. It takes like 2 minutes. And also, if you don't mind, we'd also love you to go on Twitter and or Instagram, if you prefer, and say that you enjoyed today's masterclass, and if you could do the hashtag PressPadRemote, that would be great. You can also tag Richard as well, so if Io could get his Twitter handle. I'll be sending out an email afterwards. Oh, and I also did find the link to the video that which I forgot to send Io, so I'll post that. That's the video that Richard was talking about with the drugs being burned. And I can see why you should definitely go and look at that. I haven't watched it yet because I was watching the talk, obviously. So next week we've got a great talk on Wednesday. It's a Q&A. Io will be interviewing Victoria Polly. She's a broadcast journalist at BBC Essex. She's a commentator, sports commentator. She does presenting and producing. And I know that there were some people who introduced themselves earlier that work in sports journalism or doing sports journalism courses. So make sure you tune in next week at midday on Instagram, and we'll be posting it on IGTV afterwards as well. We also would love you to sign up to pitch clinics. So we are doing pitch clinics where you can send in a pitch and have a one-to-one half-an-hour session with one of the team, and we will basically whip your pitch into shape so that you can send it off and get a commission. We've already had some people get commissions after they've had the pitch clinics with us, so do sign up for that. And finally, we're relaunching our newsletter soon, so we'd love you to sign up to our newsletter as well, and that's where you'll find out about future masterclasses. We've got some great ones coming up, including tackling imposter syndrome, mentoring and how to make the most of it. And we've also got we've just had an offer today from some Sky News journalists to do how to do breaking news TV, so that will follow on nicely from this one, I think. So we will be announcing those in the newsletter, so make sure you sign up. Okay, so Richard, thank you so much again. That was amazing.